¿Me escuchan? ¿Sí? Hay gente latina por ahí, tiene que entender lo que estoy diciendo. ¿Me escuchan? All right. For those of you who didn't understand, I was just talking about you. I want to thank Faces and Voices for all the work putting the conference together, and I want to thank each and every one of you for joining and making the experience what it has been thus far. And I'm sure that today is going to be as exciting as yesterday as we move forward. So my topic here is harm reduction. And I believe that harm reduction is only effective and meaningful when grounded in social justice and equity. I truly believe that for many different reasons. So I'm going to be talking about harm reduction, and thank you, Patty, for the wonderful introduction. And you see way at the bottom there on the slide that I have more letters after my name than letters in my name. It hasn't always been like that for me. It hasn't always been like that for me. So I brought a picture to prove that I have several credentials, including the fact that I'm a prevention specialist, certified, licensed and certified as an addictions counselor, and I used to have long hair. And so hopefully that thing will bring you to that moment which my family was very proud of. And I have a PhD, and I also have a GED. And my GED I earned in prison. And it was more challenging to earn a GED in prison than a PhD out here. I am a person that hasn't used drugs, including alcohol, for the last 37 and a half years. Gracias. Muchas gracias. That enables me to never again be a slave to the criminal injustice system that exists in the United States of America. That enables me to be a productive member of my familia. That enables me to be here today and to be productive at the community level. In harm reduction, people want to get to strategies and techniques and what we should be doing. Like in everything else, we want to go there. I believe that many times we need to slow down and understand history and context. That is a picture of my beautiful mom, who taught me a great deal about history and context. And she was always telling me, remember what happened yesterday, remember what you did the week before, and remember where we are now and why we came here. Referring to the fact that I am Puerto Riqueño and we came from Puerto Rico in 1968, when the country in inner city was up in flames because we were not wanted here. And Black and African-American folks were treated horrendously, and still are in many cities across the country. So she taught me a little bit about history and what we should understand about context, right? So before I move forward, it is Pride Month, right? Chévere, muy bien, muy bien. So let's remember Stonewall, and let's remember who led Stonewall. Because many times we think of people and we forget them, the most marginalized, who lead important movements in the country. So what has the recovery movement done? What has the recovery movement meant to us in this country and all over the world? People experiencing substance use disorders were founders of this field. 100% of people working in the field were people needing services, seeking services, or identifying as being in recovery. Let us never forget that, because right now, we are less than half of the field. And there's important rationale and reasons why that has happened. The other piece is that there's over 21 million people who identify as being in recovery from a substance use disorder. And there's about 44 million people who identify as being in recovery from a mental health challenge. This is millions and millions and millions of families, not just individuals, and then millions of allies who have joined the movement, right? The largest expansion of our workforce has been because of the peer workforce. That has been the largest expansion. It's important to recognize that, right? And many of you are in the room. We built this. We built this. Don't let people come in front of you to take credit for something that they have not built, for something that many are trying to co-opt into something different. Don't allow that to happen. Also, our field has recreated, built, and institutionalized discriminatory practices of oppression. We have to grapple with that history as well. The built systems have institutionalized racism, sexism, homophobia, ageism, all of those things that are discriminatory. So we have a lot to celebrate, but we have a lot to atone for and a lot of work to do in front of us. The substance use disorder field has resisted and obstructed harm reduction for a very long time. And it's time that we move away from that nonsense. It is time that we move away from those practices. Many in the recovery movement have also opposed and continue to oppose harm reduction based on things that I believe they don't understand, right? So I celebrate what we have contributed to, but I also denounce and challenge every one of us in this room to do something differently as it relates to what has been boiled down to, unfortunately, an acronym: diversity, equity, and inclusion. That is part of the co-opting of movements. One day I woke up and all of a sudden I'm BIPOC. BIPOC, ¿qué carajo es eso? The hell is that? We love to put things into little boxes, and then they mean nothing to many people. To those of us who live in that space, who work in that space, they mean life and death for our folk. Have you been to the conferences, to the meetings where people say addiction and mental health don't discriminate? Have you been one of those people who claps at this mantra? I sit way on the back, kudos to the people in the back, and I don't clap because I know some things about the reality on the ground. And that reality includes the fact that individuals discriminate. Individuals discriminate on a daily basis. And I have been one of those individuals. Systems discriminate, and they're composed of policies, procedures, ways of doing things that either allow some people to get in and push other people out. We have built a system. We have built a system that is designed to serve primarily white, heterosexual, affluent males. And if you feel uncomfortable right now, good, because nothing has ever changed unless we're made to feel uncomfortable. Think about the over 250 people that will die today. Think about 250 families who will be informed of that. Think about the funerals that are taking place as we speak. Think about the families who couldn't bury somebody, but they need to cremate them because they can't afford it. So feeling uncomfortable sitting in this room while being paid to be in this room, it's not that bad. It's not that bad. We have created deliberate silos. Mental health over here, substance use disorders over there, prevention services somewhere else, healthcare services somewhere else, child welfare somewhere else, health and human services somewhere else. These have been created by funding sources who in part tell you, you must collaborate, but you must compete. You must collaborate, but you must compete. I fund you to do this, but not that. And those are our tax dollars at work. And some of us have bought into the silos. Oh, no, I don't do that. No, I don't do this. So we have responsibility to bear. When we walk through the door, all of us in this room, for any type of service, we bring our full selves into that space. Imagine when we tell people, I know, I need to refer you over there. And then the person doesn't get there or doesn't receive the services, and what do? We blame the person. We say, oh, they fell through the cracks. Well, fell through the cracks. There are gaping holes in our system, and we kick people in those holes. Never mind falling through cracks that puts the onus on the individual. Where's my responsibility? Where is my responsibility? We have pioneered punitive approaches, and we continue to this day. Funding has never been what it is right now, but we still don't have enough funding. If we did, we would be in a different place. So that is punitive. Reoccurrence. My slides just got distorted for whatever reason. What we know as a relapse, reoccurrence. When people have exhibited signs and symptoms of their disease, what have we done? What do we continue to do? We kick people out of care. We kick people out of care. We make it more difficult for them. How many of you have been treated indifferently because you have had experiences with reoccurrence? Raise your hand. Look around the room. This is alive and well. This wasn't yesterday. And if you work at an agency or within us, oh, we don't do that anymore. Anymore is the key word. But still people are experiencing this. And it doesn't end there in terms of punitive approaches. We have criminalized mental health and substance use disorders in this country effectively and have it down to a science. And the other thing that we have done, which is appalling, is that we have criminalized color, because the majority, disproportionately, of people who are incarcerated are Native people, Black and African American people, Hispanic, Latino lay folks, and poor people, because this is a system that incarcerates poor people, including poor white males, across the country. That's what we have done. That's what we need to denounce. Those are the things that we need to move away from. And our systems have pioneered this. We love to talk about stigma existing outside of our system. This lives within. Within. We are the people who call people frequent flyers and addicts and substance abusers and bipolar and schizophrenics, pathologizing people, treating people badly. Grandma down the street didn't do that. That is our system. That is our field. If we are to atone, we have to take responsibility. How many of you believe that we have an opioid crisis in the country? Raise your hand. Some of you didn't raise your hands because you've heard me talk about this before. Why? After decades and decades and decades and decades of people dying, do we declare a crisis in recent history? October of 2017. Anybody? Why? Thank you to all the white people who said that. Because I used to say that, and people would get pissed off at me. Tengo los pantalones puestos, I can take that. The reality is that young white people should not be dying. They deserve access to treatment, to prevention, to intervention, to the multiple pathways of recovery and recovery supports. And so does everybody else, damn it. Everybody else. Not just a few people. Now, if you're sitting in this room and you raise your hand that we have an opioid crisis, I respectfully disagree. Our crisis is way more complicated than just opioids. Way more complicated than just opioids. Context matters, right? We have a crisis in substance use disorders, plural, not singular. More people died last year of alcohol-related disease than all the other drugs combined, to the tune of over 150,000 people in the country. Over 400,000 died of tobacco use. And yes, people died of methamphetamine use and cocaine use, and yes, opioids. I'm not trying to minimize that. But context matters, and the way that we talk matter. We have a crisis in healthcare, in the criminal and justice system, in gambling for many of our folks who are struggling with that silent disease, in child welfare, where kids from Black and brown families are removed at a greater clip than their white counterparts. In mental health, in education, in workforce, and employment, we have a crisis. Even though the country would have us to believe, when you watch CNN and ABC and CBS and all those major, unemployment, lowest as it's been in 50 years, 4% unemployment rate. Well, the unemployment rate for Native Americans is more like 20%. For African Americans, it's more like 18%. For Hispanic, Latino, Latin people, it's more like 13 to 14%. And for people with a criminal offender record, like the one that I have, is 27%. So what the hell are we talking about? I wear a disparities lens. I don't take in data and don't question it. My mom told me, why do you have that big head? To carry all that hair, you need to think critically about what you're being told. Do not swallow what are perceived to be facts. When we have a myopic view of what the problem is, we always come up with myopic solutions that sustain the status quo. A few days ago, CDC reported what? A 3% reduction in opioid overdose deaths in the country. Did you see that? I am hopeful that those numbers will come down in the future. But remember what happens when numbers come down. The myopic view that it's just an opioid thing, the numbers of opioid deaths, overdose deaths, for Black and African American, Hispanic, Latino, Native people are through the roofs. There isn't a reduction for us. So let us stop celebrating nonsense. Because it is. In my house, we are as healthy as the unhealthiest person in the house. In my house, we are as healthy as the unhealthiest person in the house. And when that person gets better, everybody gets better. Those of you who know me know what I'm about to talk about next. And some of you are saying, well, that's a big ass. And it is. I refuse to go anywhere in the country and talk about harm reduction, substance use disorders, and mental health without addressing the elephant in the room, and that is mass incarceration. How many people here have been touched by that injustice system? Raise your hand. Look around you. Look around you. And some people, in certain settings, don't raise their hand because stigma and discrimination is real. And we have internalized messages about these things, right? They are real. In 1970, there were 200,000 people incarcerated in the US. In 2024, 2.3 million people. This is the largest prison population per capita in the world. USA, number one. USA, nobody? People are quick with that chant for other things, but not for this. Not for this. 5 to 6 million people on probation, parole, or house arrest. 65% with a mental health condition diagnosable. 80% with a substance use issue, according to national data. Over 95% are poor people. This is a system that is efficient in doing what? Incarcerating poor people, including poor whites. 600,000 will be released today, not today, this year, per year, from federal and state prisons. An additional 7 million will be released from county jails. Combine those two numbers, that's almost 8 million people. Those of you in this room who work in reentry, charged with harm reduction, and doing a whole bunch of really good work, know that the majority of these 8 million people do not get reentry services. Their reentry into our community is like this. It is abrupt. It is criminal to treat people that way, human beings. 75% of that 8 million people will be rearrested within a year. 70 million people in this country have a criminal offender record. Disproportionately Native, African American, Black, Hispanic, Latino, Latin people. This is the system that we have built. This is the system that exist that touch the lives. And I will have us all remember that when one person goes to jail, the entire family goes to jail. The entire family. Kudos to the folks in the room who work with families. Now, most of our reentry support services are geared towards individuals and not the family. We have to do a better job of that. Now, there are policies that drive mass incarceration. This didn't fall from the sky. Someone yell out a policy. The war on drugs, 1970, Tricky Dick. I didn't give him the name, but I like repeating it. Nixon. We're going to go after people who use drugs, who possess drugs. We're going to incarcerate them. In the interest of time, I'm going to give you a list of policies. Zero tolerance. 1994, the largest crime bill in U.S. history, given to us and signed into law by Bill Clinton, gave us the terms of animals and super predators when describing black and brown men very specifically. Those things have power. They exist to this day. Again, I'm going to give you the list. Deinstitutionalization, 1960, President Kennedy, we're going to close all state mental institutions. His mom, Eunice Kennedy, influenced the policy and said, we need to reintegrate these people back into community. The first part of the law happened, the second part did not happen. The war on drugs, we've talked about that. Criminalization of behaviors. What was Brother Gardner doing in New York City when the New York City Police Department killed him, choked him? What was he doing? He was selling loosies. At some point that wasn't illegal. No one deserves to be killed, not even for that or for anything else, by a police officer. But here we sit with that experience of George Floyd and countless others throughout the history of the U.S. The Rockefeller laws in New York State, stop and frisk, they are born out of criminalization of behaviors, and we're trying to criminalize panhandling as we speak across the country. And we're criminalizing encampments where people are sleeping in tents. Really? They're criminals because they don't have a place to live? That's criminalizing poverty. Powder versus crack cocaine. We go back to what? We go back to the devastation imposed on communities of color very specifically, and more targeted to black and African American folks who are doing time as we speak for small amounts of crack cocaine, while people with large amounts of powder get off. 100 to 1 is the disparity in sentencing originally. Obama reduced it to 18 to 1, but it's still a disparity. Mandatory minimums, 5, 10, 15, 20 years behind the wall without the right to reentry, probation, parole. Very little to no reentry services. No voting rights in upwards of 20 states. If I move there because I have several felonies on my criminal offender record, I can't vote. And then we go around telling people, if you don't vote, you can't complain. Shut up. Stop telling people they can't complain. They can complain, we will complain, and we'll do something about it. That's bullshit. I paid my debt to society 37 and a half years ago. Why am I still paying today? Why are you still paying today? You know who I'm talking about. Oh, but you can expunge your record. Yeah. Everybody? Come on. In my house, we are as healthy as the unhealthiest person in the house. That's my response to that. Denied bail, school zones designed to impact inner city. In the city where I live, only 1,000 feet is not a school zone. The majority of people who live in inner city are who? People of color. 3 strikes and you're out. Guy in Texas doing life. 2 slices of pizza, his 3rd strike. Guy in California broke into a soup kitchen. My friend in Massachusetts, he stole a car. I'm not Pollyanna. I needed to go to jail for some of the things that I did. But really, life in prison for 2 slices of pizza? There's thousands of these cases across the country. Massive prison construction. Take a look at where prisons exist in the country. In affluent white neighborhoods, the majority of people who work within them are white. They vote, really good salaries, retirement benefits, and they don't vote against their interests. Privatization of prisons and jails. Mira que bien, cantos de cabrones. Listen. It pisses me off to no end, right? They're traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Believe that? Criminal offender records, the boil on the cake, which prohibits people to get housing, their kids back if they were taken from the system. Employment, it's a stained stigma. Fines that are forever. Like this, circular, you can't pay your fine, we'll put you in jail. There's an increase on the fine, we'll let you out. You can't pay your fine, you go back to jail. So-called plea bargains. At the federal level, 97% of all cases are pled out. At the state level, 94%. How many of you in the room were arrested and took a plea bargain? Raise your hand. That is the same group of people raise their hand who said, I have a criminal offender record. You know why? We don't take things to trial. You know why? 3 strikes and you're out. Mandatory minimums. That DA, that district attorney is an elected official. They're concerned with not being viewed as soft on crime. And so we, of course, plea bargain. No, you're Lois, I did it, yeah. I did it. Come on, you take 25, or they're going to give you life. I'll take the 25. You take 15, they want 20. They want 10, are you willing to take 5? They want 3, are you willing to take 2? All that stuff. Think about that. This is what passes off as due process. I have never seen a jury of my peers, and I doubt that they could assemble one. Because some of my peers are in this room, and I know that they're not inviting you to jury duty. And some of us do not want to participate in that. So, is this a broken system? Raise your hands. Not broken. Not broken at all. This is a highly efficient system. It works exactly the way it was designed to work. If we view it as a broken system, we tinker around the edges. If we view it as a system that is designed for the majority of people to be in there to be poor, for the majority of people to be in there to come back, for the majority of the people to experience stigma, that is a different orientation to what the challenge is, and our strategies become different. And they should become different. Critical thinking concept here. Devastating impacts, dehumanization and deaths, trauma and re-traumatization, institutionalization, continued record profits to the tunes of hundreds of billions of dollars in the country from this system. Sustainability of criminal injustice policies, and we legitimize those systems when we call them treatment systems, because they're not. For any other health disease on the face of this planet, you don't have to go to jail to be treated for it. This is where some people feel uncomfortable when I talk about this, right? Services for substance use disorders belong in community. Belong in community. Led by people like you, like us in this room. There's a fragmentation and continued division. Now, you notice that in none of the policies, I blamed individuals for miseries that they did not create. But our system says, oh, if you want to get better, all you need to do is be more like Hernàndez. Because if he got a PhD and he had a GED in prison, if he did it, anybody can do it. Get the hell out of here with that nonsense. That is not true. And for those of us who go around telling people, if I did it, anybody can do it, be careful. Because the system says otherwise. I believe that anybody and everybody in this room can get a PhD, but I know that that system is designed to keep the majority of you out. And some of us who do have that credential had to break in that piece. because they didn't invite us freely to participate in that. We had to break in there, just like many of us have to break in to recovery because our systems haven't been created to support everybody, just a few. Which brings me to my next slide. We, all of us, myself included, have to do a look inward. It begins at the individual level. Have you heard the people who say, I'm non-biased? I used to say this a great deal, I don't say it anymore. Have you heard the people who say, I'm non-judgmental? I used to say this a great deal, I don't say it anymore. Have you heard the people who say, treat others the way you want to be treated? I used to say that crap, I don't say it anymore. And my personal favorite is when people say, I treat everybody the same. Yo trato todo el mundo por igual. I treat everybody the same. I don't see color. You don't see what? I don't see color. You don't see what? I don't see color. Really? Because you just mentioned that you don't see color 3 times. If you didn't see it, why are you mentioning it? All of this is a huge crock of shit. We are all extremely biased. We are not born biased, but we learn bias, family, places of worship, education. You're learning bias now. Some of it is based on theory and practice and evidence and science, but it is biased because I got to select the slides. I got to select the talking points. Are we judgmental? Some of you didn't say yes. And some of you said, I'm not judgmental, Hernàndez. You are, because the moment you opened your mouth, you started judging. Welcome to the crowd. That's a judgment. If you disagree with me, it's a judgment. If you disagree with me, it is a judgment. We judge. How many 59-year-old Puerto Rican males in the room? Raise your hand. I have no business treating you like a 59-year-old Puerto Rican male. And if this room was filled with 59-year-old Puerto Rican males, we're not all the same. The look inward is important. We love to look outward. My mom told me, Hernàndez, 3 fingers pointing back. We're good at looking outward and telling people what to do, when to do it, how to do it. When it doesn't work, we blame them. When do we take responsibility? When are people in recovery? When are people in recovery? Oh, you've been well trained. What if they don't identify in this way? Then some of us get all bent out of shape and we try to impose our views on other people. Yes, many of us do this. Remember that 21 million and 44 million? The stat there was people who identify as being in recovery. Those numbers are an undercount. There are millions of people, there are millions more who don't identify with the term recovery. Many people from the faith community, they don't say I'm in recovery, they say God lifted the obsession to use. They don't identify with that. I know people who stopped using, they've never been to a group, they've never come to a conference, they don't talk to us, they don't go to any of that stuff. Are they doing better? Yes. And that's what counts. Not interested in you identifying the way that I identify. I'm interested in celebrating whatever it is that you're doing that's working and to ask the question, how can I support that? Not the lecture on telling people what to do and how to do it. So what is harm reduction? We had to go through that piece to talk about this piece. Because if not, we'll continue to repeat the mistakes of the past. It is a practical set of strategies and ideas aimed at reducing negative consequences associated with drug use. It is also a movement for social justice built on the belief in and respect for the rights of people who use drugs. Many people talk harm reduction, they haven't even seen the principles. And I don't have enough time to go over the principles, but I encourage you to look at the principles of harm reduction so that we can dispel myths and misconceptions of what it is and what it isn't. Warning, harm reduction, like every other movement, is currently being co-opted. So a whole bunch of organizations across the country right now saying, oh, we're harm reduction. We're harm reduction. Reminds me of the 90s and the faith-based initiative by then Bush, where a bunch of organizations, oh, we're faith-based. Wherever the money is, they pivot to. And then you ask, what are you doing around harm reduction? Oh, we give out Narcan. Really? Good, you should. But that's the way that you identify and describe harm reduction, because you give out Narcan? I have Narcan in my bag. Narcan is a tool. It is not the thing that you use to identify as being in the harm reduction movement. Let's be careful with this. And I'm also speaking to funders in the room. When you fund applications, make sure that you're funding harm reduction, not the people who say that they're doing harm reduction. Who here in this room practices harm reduction? Raise your hand. Right? Some people did, some people did not. I woke up this morning, I brushed my teeth. I got in my car, I put on my seatbelt. I cross the street, I look both ways. I don't hang out at bars. I don't hang out with people who sell or use drugs unless I'm working. Harm reduction has been around for a very long time. For a very long time. It gets controversial in some areas. How many of you practice harm reduction? Raise your hand. I hope you brushed your teeth this morning. I hope you took a shower, put on some clothes, look both ways, put on a seatbelt. See how we are judgmental. See how we are biased. It lives within us in different ways. While our people die, we argue. While our people die, we argue. Those are my nieces and my sister. My sister did 10 years of mandatory time in MCI Framingham in Massachusetts. My sister died while we were arguing. How many of us have lost sisters, brothers, cousins, mothers, grandmothers, nieces, nephews in this very room while we are arguing about certain things? Here's part of the argument. You ignore the evidence and the reality and people die. And we yell that at people because supposedly we're enlightened and we read the research. That research is not accessible to all people. It's written in languages that people don't understand. Most people on the ground, and then we expect them to understand what the research says. And you need to pay for that research article to be able to access it. And the icing on the cake, it doesn't include research done by, for, with people of color, marginalized groups. It's always on the same group of people. We have to do a better job of making research accessible if we are to put that expectation that people understand what the research says. You're condoning drug use and people die. What do we have in common? People die while we argue. Some of us, myself included, used to believe this. Or you're handing out needles, or you're condoning drug use. Huge crock of shit. But it lives there. But if you speak to people who believe in this, they will say some things if we speak with them, not at them. So I speak with people on the ground. They say, you know, it's right. It's really interesting, particularly people of color. They'll tell me it's really interesting. We haven't had full access to the continuum, but now you want to impose harm reduction on us. What's that all about? Because we don't trust them. Because we know Tuskegee. We know discriminatory practices by health systems against people of color. We know forced sterilization of women of color. We know all of that. But we don't want to talk about that. We don't want to hear people coming up with why they don't trust this. We need to engage in conversations with and not at. I wish we had more time. Dead people don't recover. Dead people don't recover or get better. Change is not an event, it is a process. And we know the 5 stages of change by Prochaska and Di Clemente. And many of us, if not all of us, who identify as being in recovery or getting better, or whatever that term is for us, we were once in pre-contemplation. I know I was. None of you in this room, but some people who approached me when I was in pre-contemplation, I used to say, fuck off. I wonder. I'm not bothering you. I didn't ask you for any money. Get away from me. Yet we want to impose on people without understanding these concepts. Those of you who have been trained, you know, And those of you who can look inward, you know. Some of us in this room are in pre-contemplation right now. Soon as they serve lunch, you'll see. And some of you right now just said, mind your business, Hernàndez. What I eat is none of your business. I'm not going to the gym. Pre-contemplation, right? What is the most controversial thing right now in harm reduction? All right. Safe consumption sites. Rebranded to what? Overdose prevention centers. That's the most controversial thing right now. I remember in the 80s when condoms were controversial. They said, all young, and I was young back then. I am not now. They said, all young people are going to go crazy and they're going to be having sex everywhere if you give them condoms. And I said, I can't wait. I'm in. It didn't happen. That was a crock of shit. Bias crept in, right? Now, how many of you have ever been, listen to the wording, how many of you have ever been into a legal safe consumption site? Legal safe consumption site. Few hands, not a lot. Okay. How many of you have ever been into a bar? You see how we're full of shit? That's my academic term for today. We're full of shit. We have all been into bars and into parties where alcohol is being served legally, a drug that kills over 150,000 people a year. Why is it controversial when we talk about this? Because it's illicit drugs, because we think and we have equated that to people of color, to people that cannot be trusted, to marginalized people. That is why. And we have internalized those messages as well. It is about time that we do away with that bullshit. It is about time. I don't see any of us going to the bar in the lobby, you know, around the corner and saying, we need to close this down. None of us are doing that. But it exists in society. My timekeeper just told me that I have like 10 minutes left. We have a criminal injustice and a militarized approaches to challenges that are public health in nature, that have to do with the structural determinants of health. We're not talking about the social determinants of health, the structural determinants of health. Structural implies what? Built systems. They did not fall into place by coincidence. We have a responsibility to dismantle those spaces and places that are unjust for our folk. If we want to lead, we have to lead with a public health approach to a public health issue and not a criminal injustice one. And let's be careful not to legitimize criminal injustice approaches by saying, oh, you know, folks need this too. No. I didn't need to go to jail to access treatment. I didn't need to, and those people who did and accessed it, they didn't need to be there for that. And I believe in personal accountability. Some people need to go to jail, and I needed to go to jail. But really, 2.3 million people? Really? I don't think so. I just took a look up because my teleprompter went down, and my advancer's not working. And I need to get to where I need to be. Here's where we are. Huh? When you put, to the funders in the room, when you put our tax dollars, not your budgets, not your tax dollars, our tax dollars, into racist, oppressive, and discriminatory systems and organizations, you know what happens? They effectively recreate and expand those discriminatory systems and processes. Let us stop putting money into systems that we know are discriminatory and racist and homophobic and everything else down the line. Let us not continue to make those mistakes. Oh, but we can only tell by an application. Then get out of your office and go into communities and learn what's happening on the ground. Let's do that. And for those of us in this room who are advocates, let's advocate for that. We have a responsibility to do that. In order to work We need to do away with this concept of cultural competency. Competency denotes that I know everything there is to know about culture, and nothing could be further from the truth. If there's one thing that I've learned about culture, is that I am culturally incompetent, not competent. What we need to do is lead with cultural humility, which is about what? A lifelong commitment to self-evaluation and self-critique. Who am I? And what do I bring to this endeavor? And how do I redress power imbalances? And how do I work with people? People go around, I save people's lives, I save people's lives, I save people's lives. Shut up. The only time I've done that is administering Narcan on someone who's dying. The rest of the time, I walk side by side people. I support, I educate, I learn, I walk side by side, I support, I educate, I learn, and they begin to take on those responsibilities themselves. And they save their own lives, not me. You know what that is? That is paternalistic. I want to come into this community because I want to save them. Who's them? We need not just to focus on criminal justice reform. We have to do restorative justice. Our harm reduction practices have to be grounded in restorative justice. They have to be. Everything that we do has to be grounded in restorative justice. Because the majority of our folk that we're trying to bring into the spaces of wellness, of getting better, of recovery, dare I say it, have been touched by that system. And their families have been touched by that system. We have to have an orientation towards that. You know advocacy, lowercase advocacy. It's the advocacy that I do with people at the individual level. With, not on. Uppercase advocacy is the advocacy that I do to what? To impact structures and systems that were built in discriminatory ways. We have to continue to engage in that. When I say we, our recovery movement, when people get up in front of us and they take credit, just know that they did not create that. They get to announce, here's the funding, and we just made this funding, and people clap. And no, but the people who made that happen are all of the people in this room who work on advocacy in front of the federal government, state governments, local governments, and communities. So, simply delivering services with token participation is not equity. Working to actively dismantle systems of oppression, that's equity and prevention and inaction. Our movement doesn't need allies. Yeah, I said it. It doesn't need allies. What we need is co-conspirators and co-defendants. The type that don't rat you out, the type who go to jail with you, the type who sit side by side. Not at 5 o'clock, I gotta go, I got a dinner appointment. Very convenient to self-appoint myself as an ally without putting the fucking work in with communities, on behalf of communities, hand in hand with people who have been oppressed. We're tired of, yeah, I'm an ally. Me voy porque I have a dinner appointment. Sick and tired of that. My last slide. How many of you work in prevention? Raise your hand. Some of you stop raising your hand. Every time he asks me to raise my hand, I'm going to get messed up. I'm not going to do that anymore. We work really hard to pull some people out of the rivers of substance use disorders, mental health challenges, poverty, homelessness, incarceration, etc. Some people. Notice the pigmentation of the skin of the people on this boat, and notice the fact that they have a boat. Historically, racialized, marginalized people have had no choice to do for ourselves, and we have. Make no mistake about that. We are in this room because we have, and we're committed to that. Then there are those that we have intentionally left behind because it is more profitable to profit from misery, misery that people did not create. Poor people didn't create poverty. Hungry people didn't create hunger. The unhoused didn't create homelessness. And the list goes on. So here's my call to all of us. Let's listen to Desmond Tutu. who said, we need to stop just pulling people out of the river. We need to go upstream and find out why they're falling in to begin with. That is the call for prevention. That is the call for prevention. You have kids, nieces, nephews, young people that you care about. What do you want them to have? The bed when they need it for a mental health or a substance use issue? Or you want them to never need that? And I know that your response is the latter. So let's get to work. Let's embrace prevention. Let us stop being in the silo of just, no, I only do recovery. Let's embrace harm reduction. Let's get out of that silo that I only do one thing. Because the needs in community, the needs of our people demand that we do that. Muchas gracias.